name's Tony Rucci, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about pen testing and really more on the passive network assessment side of it and some ways that you can help some clients save a little bit of their budget. And we'll talk to you a little bit about that, and I'll tell you why with a little background of why we started taking this approach with some of our clients. Here's the topic of the day, and I always do a couple of different slides. That's the formal topic that's submitted that you know, social engineered into accepting it. Really, it's about sitting back and listening to other people suck, because their nightmare out there a lot of times when you show up. Any pen testers in here who really do bang on gear? You guys realize it already, and you can share that with others. I mean, it hurts a lot of times when you show up out there, and you can break people's gear every time when you're doing pen testing is kind of the rule of thumb. But there's a lot of value in being able to show them why their configurations were a little bit out of sync. There's a little bit about me. I'm a retired counterintelligence special agent. I spent a good deal of my career investigating traditional espionage, sabotage, sedition. Tracked very early in my career into computer crimes investigations. Skipped lunch one day and somebody came in and said, you know, who knows anything about computers? I had a trash 80 on my desk at home, and we're already pirating wares. We had dual cassette drives on it. And this is way before you were born, Jason. And spent a couple tours at the White House as a counterintelligence operations officer, and I was doing technical policy oversight. Back then in secure facilities, they were writing policy on how you bring these things they call PDAs, now we just call them our life forms and phones, right, into secure spaces. And tired out of there, went to Oak Ridge, Tennessee, out there to Oak Ridge National Lab structure. Last 6 years I've been out in Reno and recently back to East Tennessee, and I split my time back and forth. Got a couple of grandbabies. That's how old I am. I've been married for 33 years. Holy mackerel. To the same person, by the way. There you go. There's the kicker. So my wife will tell you that I travel a lot. People ask all the time, and that is a legit question. People say, what's the secret? How could you guys act like you're happy too? That's social media. You fake everything on social media. But she says, he travels a lot. If I'm home too long, she says, hey, about time you go hit another gig, right? So here's the flow of the discussion and kind of how we're going to talk about it. And I'll give you a little bit of the background on, you know, why I'm giving this talk here. So I spend a lot of my time out there. I've got a client who's an insurance broker for all of the counties in the state of Nevada. And so that's all the .govs, the county seats, the city seats, the sheriff's offices, fire department, police department, everything with a .gov behind it. And they don't get a whole lot of support necessarily from the state until things go sideways. And if anybody's ever done any state work, you realize when you start talking to the CISO, the CIO's office for the state, yeah, we just don't have the resources. You know, they're kind of out on their own. They're all doing their own thing until things go sideways. And then they're on them. And hey, how come this wasn't locked down and this wasn't squared away? And they bring their own ITS services in there. They'll run Nessus with no filters on it and spit out about a 300-page report and go, oh my God, you know, it's all, you know, everything's coming apart out here. And you go, yeah, but the first 300 pages are nothing. It's all informational. And there's about 5 or 6 critical in there. Well, it's those 5 or 6 critical that can, you know, be the difference between succeeding and failing. Problem is they don't have a whole lot of budget. Nice thing is their insurance carrier contracts us and we bill straight to the insurance carrier, but it helps them validate and confirm some of the risk in their policy because they're offering cyber insurance to each of the counties, but also to their other clients that are extensions of those counties, but they're private entities. And so that's really the illustration that I wanted to share with you is that there's some opportunity there wherever you're at in engaging in those insurance carriers and then saying, hey, on behalf of each of those clients, we go out there and they contact them and say, hey, part of your policy now provides cybersecurity coverage. We want to send our trusted entity out there to come out there and give you another set of eyes. And that's the approach that we use with the IT staff on site. Or in some of these cases, they don't even have IT staff on site. They're remote. They may be 300, 400 miles away or in another state, and they're doing periodic monitoring. They're supposed to come and touch their environment once a month or once a quarter or God knows when in a lot of cases. That's the first question. When's the last time somebody's been on site? Well, you know, Fred over here is kind of our most savvy guy, and so he works as remote hands for them a lot of times. And how many of you have ever found a printer that wasn't configured? probably every day, right? In our own house. That's one of the huge things that just kills them because they run down to local store, buy something, plug it in, and go, yeah, it works. Good IP. But some of those rural areas are the ones that really are scary when you show up out there. Seen the Clown Motel out in Tonopah? You see a lot of chatter on it. We talk about it, picking on Dave Kennedy out there because he loves clowns. And we always invite him out there to Nevada because we've got literally a real clown hotel out there. All the rooms are those dark clowns out there. They're kind of spooky as hell. And it's in the middle of nowhere. It's smack between Vegas and Reno on Highway 95. So as we engage with each of those clients, we reach out to them and say, hey, we'd like to come out there, and here's the days, and we agree on it. And then we also scope out the rules of engagement. And then it's macro and micro, and we're not going to break into their gear. Pen testers can attest to this. There's enough tools that are out there nowadays, 100% of the time, and it's not bragging. Every single one of them will attest to it. You can break somebody's gear and shut them down 100% of the time. And if you've really got a nice tight network, I start hitting you on the social engineering side. We start calling people. We call the C-suite, call the new employees who are posting out in social media that they love the fact that they got a new job out there, and it's game over. You can get them to anything pretty much. But we take a macro to micro approach. Prior to showing up on site, we'll start looking out there in open source and collecting as much as we can in some of the traffic that we crawl. We've got an engine that we've developed. It's called Beowulf, and we crawl about 200 sources in traditional internet, which you may consider, as well as darknet and deep web, and some of those nefarious chat channels and things like that out there. But we look at what we see in some of the dumps and what you guys can see as well, and the challenge is they're just not looking for it in most cases. They've got their hair on fire a lot of cases. They show up to work on Monday with a nice little list of things they want to do, and they never get to that list by Friday, and then they start that cycle over wash and rinse every day. And then once we do show up on site, we start sniffing wireless, and we'll be out in the parking lot and those types of things. And there's my Yagi that I throw in my truck if we're doing something local out in the area. But we'll travel with that as well. But you really don't even need that. I mean, a simple antenna on your laptop or with your Wi-Fi Pineapple or something like that is suffice in most of these places because you have the authority to go there and work. And I'll talk to you about some of the paperwork we do that's a little bit non-traditional just to make sure that you don't end up eating asphalt. And we kind of work our way into the network and get into the building, start looking at open and common ports around the area. You got the waiting room. Everybody has their ports, and they're not doing really sharp port management. You plug in, you can see everything, and you're uncredentialed on the environment. We coordinate with them ahead of time and say, hey, here's what I want to do. And we kind of walk them through that process. We send this out to them. Here's the rules of engagement. Here's what we're going to do, but we're not going to bang on your gear. We're not going to shut anything down. That's their biggest fear, is that they're going to have downtime. And, if we can't pull them off into a virtual environment for something that we really need to test, we do that once we're there if we need to, but if they don't have the capabilities there, it always makes them nervous. But a lot of cases we tell them, say, hey, and at some point, I want to be ready to get just a new employee user level credentials with no access so that we can see what a general employee might see on the network. Sadly, in a lot of cases, once you plug into any port, you're doing port management, and all of a sudden now I can see everything on the landscape. Well, we can save ourselves that step because we can see everything in there. And then we start walking down each of those systems, and there's quite a few tools that are out there available to you that really don't bang the network up too much. Things that are out of scope for us is we won't launch any of those active exploits. And that's a difficult conversation in a lot of cases because nobody ever believes it. It says, well, how can you run Heatmap and scan my network? And that's a volatile tool. I go, well, you watch a whole lot of Scorpion. And because that's kind of how they're doing everything in there, right? I says, I'm probably not going to fly over the 747 and upload or download all your malware either, like on Scorpion. That's where everybody's perception is out there. The reality is 747. No. But the reality is we don't do any social engineering. We don't start hitting the employees. It's proven time and time again. There's so much traffic out there nowadays, you don't need to really prove that piece to them, but you can gather that in a lot of cases. And some of these places are pretty small, but oh, it's not that. He's scared. And we're not going to hit the mobile devices either. We're not going to start targeting phones and tablets and some of the mobile devices unless they're attached to the network. They become a target on the network for us as well that we'll scan and provide them some feedback on there. But the bottom line is no breaky. If there's anything that we see a vulnerability that exists, and we'll run it across a lot of the different resources out there, exploit database or whatever that might be out there. We see something that might return that we find a vulnerability, we'll screenshot that and then give them that reference, and I'll show you how we reference that stuff out in the reporting to them to say, hey, you can go back and look at that later on. And there are a few occasions where they'll come back to us and say, you know what, that's my baby box right there, and you know what, you can't get into it. And go, challenge accepted. And then we'll do some additional paperwork, or we might pull that machine aside or something like that, or pull it off net, or put it on a separate VLAN and then prove it to them. We won't hit third-party vendors unless they're specifically scoped out there. A lot of times you'll see connections within their networks, and that creates a lot of havoc. Somebody all of a sudden starts getting scanning. If they are actually doing a good job of monitoring their environment, they might see some of that scanning, even if it's not volatile. One of the things that we do is we do an authority to assess or authority to access. And so depending on the type of engagement, we get that specific permission from somebody who has the authority to allow you to attack their network or scan the network. And this is both for pen testing, but also we do this on the passive network side, because if I've got one of my guys sitting out in the parking lot with antennas sticking up all over his box, or we're walking through the hallways with NetScout or something like that, where we're sniffing the traffic out there to be able to create a heat map, it kind of looks out of place. And if they start calling local sheriff or something like that, and we're walking around a building, and before they ask questions, what do they usually do? They want to make sure that they've contained the issue, and if they see you as a threat, you're going to be eating asphalt. And you can go, hey, reach in my back pocket. It's not a get out of jail free card, but at least it creates that avenue for a conversation to the person who has authority and says, yep, we have them out here. Most cases, though, because we'll do the county seat, and then like the following day, we'll do the law enforcement. We've already pre-coordinated with them, and they know that we're coming ahead of time. But the document that I've done for nearly 30 years, every time we've done an assessment anywhere, and it's just worthwhile taking that time. It's a single pager. We communicate back and forth with the team if they've got a SOC. Some cases they have somebody who's doing external monitoring for them. We give them our VPNs and our IPs for wherever we're remoting from, and especially when we're on the external piece and we start scanning, because we will run some tools on there, and I'll talk to them a bit. When we start running burp on them or zap or something like that from afar, it does create a little bit of noise, and you want to give them as much heads up, and they can distinguish, test environment versus a real attack or something like that that may be of concern with them. But when we're on site and if we're hitting them from somewhere down the road or something like that, we want to make sure that when we're on site that they're able to distinguish if they are getting attacked, and we want to be able to help them out with that. So we give them that afterwards, and then that way they can go back in, and it becomes a learning point for them to be able to correlate our times, our IPs with their log traffic, and we'll look at some of that stuff too if they've got it there and they pull it up, and we can help point them to that and correlate that traffic, and it becomes another kind of a mentoring piece of it. Because remember, a lot of these guys are worried about just keeping the lights on. They're not so focused on the security aspects of it. We always ask them to give us a heads up if they do see some traffic that they think is nefarious, because if somebody is hammering them at the time, we've got all of our tools right there and we can help them out. But that's not usually the case in most cases, especially in these rural areas. They really don't see a whole lot. And at the end, we provide kind of a dog and pony walkthrough, and we give them the highlights of things that we found that they can expect to see on the report as we exit out with the C-suite. And then we go back home and write a report for a couple of weeks, and then we deliver that out. And you can kind of see there's the content of what that might look like. Let me see if I can. kind of get an idea of the flow of our reporting for something like that with a passive. Some of the tools in the kit, they're the same tools that a lot of you use that you're familiar with already. Nothing, extravagant out there, and it's how you configure a lot of those tools. You can run Nessus, you can run Nmap, and you can run all these tools, and you can put them in a passive or promiscuous mode where you're not going to raise a lot of traffic out there. We'll run Wireshark out there to be able to capture some of that traffic. Doesn't necessarily mean where we find a vulnerable machine and we see an opportunity to drop some poisoning on them, and then we do it. We see that those opportunities there, we'll snapshot that specific machine, or we look that as a target, and we can go to that machine, and we'll in most cases browse right to it and screenshot it, and then find what vulnerabilities are there. And I'll show you some of the low-hanging fruit that you don't even need to snapshot it and show them the vulnerabilities there, because we can get right into the machine with default passwords. Sniper on the on-site tool, I will tell you, I'll caution you about that if you're not familiar with it. It launches a whole bunch of different tools in there, and it's almost like throwing a Metasploit attack on them, but you can carve some of those tools out, and you can turn some of the more volatile traffic off in there. But there's some passive scanning that's available to you in there, and there's a case-by-case as well, because you can engage with them and say, hey, if this, can I light this up? One of the things that we do talk to them about is if I'm, we already know what your policies are. We have your policies and procedures that we'll explore later on. But if I'm walking around your office space and I do see somebody who's left a machine unlocked and unattended, do we have permission to plug in and demonstrate what the risks are there, especially if they're up in the front desk and that machine is accessible from a common area, as opposed to a place where they have reasonable expectation of privacy behind 2 layers of security inside the office space. That's different. They're out there in that front common area. We'll plug in a Bash Bunny, and then, if you ever watch National Geographic, you see Jason out there eating lunches with Bash Bunny, right? So it's the same thing. And so it's a huge demonstrator for them, because in a lot of cases, these guys have never heard of some of these tools that are trivial at best and really easy to get. But pretty much whatever your flavor of a Linux distro and tools aside, you throw in either a Buscador or Kali Linux that comes with a full suite of tools, and then it's just what's your tool of choice that's out there. And of course, now being a Mac guy, I love the fact that we've got a Mac VM that we can throw on there, and I can kind of run a full snapshot of my box and then just kind of blow it up. Because some clients, especially in the government space, if you're dealing with the government, part of their issue is that they want copies of everything that you've done the whole time, and so you can just run your whole test environment in a VM, and that way on an external drive, and you just give it to them when you're done. You have 2 full disk encryption on it, and you forget to give them the password. You make them work for it. So, that's another engagement. Yeah, that follow-on engagement. Yeah, it's a different thing. And if you're really struggling for tools, just go to the OSINT framework. And it points you to a million tools that 999,000 of them you'll never use. But there's a whole lot of them in there. You'll find those tools that are right for you and that you favor. But Justin does a good job of keeping that updated. If you don't have that link, these slides will be available afterwards as well if you don't already have it. There it is. Look for OSINT framework. That's the big concern for everybody. It's like, wait, come on now, this can't be fun at all. It really is fun. And it's eye-opening for them, and in a lot of cases, it's eye-opening for us as well, because you see a lot of information coming back to you. We're familiar with Shodan, in the security community, that's just kind of some place you go from time to time. You go out there and look at Shodan, and you see a lot of return on that. In traditional small cities, small towns, in the .gov world, it's completely eye-opening to them. They're like, holy crap, how can they stay in business? I can't even believe this is out there. Well, it is, and as we say in the South, too late, you're pregnant. Because a lot of times I can plug in something that if you remember nothing in this talk at all, remember that. Too late. They click it, or you can go out there and search on it, and you get some return, they're pregnant. There's so many different places you can go to pull back a little bit of traffic for them on them that they see value in it already. And if they have that trust in you that you're not going to take that and try to get somebody fired, it's, there's 100 different ways that you can write up a pen test report or an assessment report, and you can get somebody fired just by using the wrong vernacular or the wrong terminology in there. And the reality is, it's real easy to get compromised. And at some point, every organization has the ability to get compromised. It's how they recover from that, and in helping them build a strategy to recover. So that's the message that I always use, is about recovery and talking about that. Always going to be an insider threat in the organization, whether it's intentional or unintentional. And what you want to help them do is be able to highlight and get some visibility on that. And they're never going to go away, and you're never going to be able to completely eliminate the insider threat. It's how you manage that. And it's all about taking care of the organization and taking care of the people in the organization. Because CI guy, we have that saying, is if you take care of people, they'll take care of you. If you don't take care of people, they'll take care of you. And so you think about that for just a moment. It's the same thing. Is really all comes back, even though we're talking about a technical instance, it's about people all day long. I washed that out just a little bit just to show you. I mean, password dumps, you see it all the time. And nowadays, I mean, heck, just 2017 alone, it's really blown up. And so if you can't find at least one password from some company organization that somebody hasn't gone out and registered their Fitbit or registered for Soma FM or their Dropbox, and they use their password at work, you're not trying hard, because it's out there. And all you have to do is go to a few of those places. And every single time you see one of those dumps, we pull them down and we throw them in our servers, and we were able to crawl it locally. It's a lot quicker. But those are things that we see almost every day. And that really comes back to a policy and procedure. And that's what creates that backdoor into a lot of these organizations. Deloitte was a great example of that. One of the senior vice presidents there and one of the senior managers registered her Fitbit using her Deloitte account. January 2016, October 2016, Fitbit got compromised. A couple weeks later, so did Deloitte. Are they correlated? Or are they connected? Probably not. But there were 5 other seniors in the company that did the exact same thing, and their passwords were out there, and their passwords sucked. So we all know passwords suck. Two-factor, and they weren't. So some of the things that we use for the external, we use Burp and we use Zap. I don't use any of them independently, because you get a lot of false positives in those cases, and the only ones we really report on are the ones that we can cross-correlate between the two and almost kind of verify. But we give them the full reports on them. That way they can run down and chase some of those things themselves and have a little bit of back-end knowledge on it. And it's always eye-opening. How we document, we just document, hey, here's the level of the incident or the finding. We have a little bit of discussion about it, and what that threat really represents. And it's really, to me, in the Intel community, it's so what? What's the so what to this? And sometimes they don't necessarily see that as to why it might be a vulnerability. And then what our recommendation is in layman's terms for them. And then the CVE or CWE, or give them a technical reference where they can go back and reference that, and it gives them a little bit more detail and scripts to run and configuration controls. And that's the huge value for them, actually hyperlinking in the report. Here, click this. It's probably okay, right? But for us, in our mind, and especially if you're an assessor, for us, it's just, hey, we're just pointing out things that are obvious, and a lot of times it's low-hanging fruit to them. It's just, it blows their mind, and that scares the hell out of you, because now I'm thinking, well, wait a minute, this is a place that's hosting my driver's license. And think about all the third-order effects if your driver's license is compromised because they're running 68 XP machines in Department of Nevada driver's license. So in that wireless piece of it as well, we'll also run something like NetScout, NetSpot, where we can run around and give them footprinting of their deployment of their wireless and what that looks like. And in some cases, like here, it maps it out and says, hey, you're doing all right, job. In some cases, they might have one that's just sitting underneath a judge's bench in the chambers, and they're the only ones who are able to get any kind of wireless, and they don't realize why nobody else, and the mayor back there in the corner doesn't get any wireless back there. So you get one hotspot that's a $24 router from Walmart. So This is something that's traditional that we can typically see in from the external scanning, and then we'll compare notes from the outside to the inside and do a correlation to see what we can see, what pinholes we see in the network, and we'll drop it into something like Maltego and give them a nice representation. In some cases, you can't find out, or they won't know what all's on their network. You always ask that, how many devices do you have on your network, in devices? Well, yeah, you know, anywhere between 3 and, I don't know, 800, something like that, somewhere in there, ballpark. Exposed devices, once you're looking externally and internally, it's eye-opening. And I don't care how hard you're looking or how easy you're looking, you'll see a lot of those printers. For financial institutions, it's almost their death, because what you'll see is somebody will plug in a printer, and most time it's going to be an HP printer, and you can sniff it out in the parking lot, and it's going to give you, access into their internal network there on an operation floor. PCI standards are much more rigorous than HIPAA. HIPAA's squishy and tough to enforce if you mess around in the hospital world at all, or medical environment. PCI actually has some teeth behind it, and some people are generally fined a lot more and held to that rigorous standard. But the concern with printers and the so what on the printers are really the networked printers are the ones that are the juicy ones for us, because they've got the hard drives in there and we can see all the things that have been printed. And in those cases, if you've ever seen one of the Zebra printers, you can download that document and we start handing over somebody's contract of one or means or another to them. It really gets their attention. Bless you. Yes, sir. Right there, using it as their access point. Yeah. Because it runs an instance of Linux. Yeah. Yeah, so it's running an instance, a real thin client Linux backend, and so now it's almost like running a RPi on their access on their printer. That's okay. I just now I'm 15 slides all jacked up. No, it's okay. No, it's a good point though. I probably should have just said yeah and then not moved on, huh? But I'm a little ADD, and squirrels. You probably never heard of that in the IT world at all. But the message is printers are the low-hanging fruit, but they're not the only ones that create a lot of havoc. I'll talk about that a little bit, but the illustration for them a lot of times is people say, no, there's no way you can create an access point out of a printer, but it's for that very reason, because they do have their own instance, depending on the flavor of it, its own little Linux distribution. But at the same time, while I might not be able to get internet and I can't go out and surf Google in a lot of cases, I can still scan the network, and then I can jump around and I can see multiple segments in the network if it's even segmented, which is usually not the case, and we can see everything. And this is an example that we gave to somebody that we could show by connecting to that printer first. I can extrapolate all of the configuration, then I can disconnect. I create the same, and I just mimic all of the configurations and MAC addressing, and then I'm that printer when I get on, and that's why I call my box Zombie Printer, because it ends up being a printer in a lot of cases. And now I can jump around, and it's a trusted agent on the network already. And so now I can go around and do what I want. Funny thing is, sometimes you'll get a printer job thrown at you, and it'll start goofing up your traffic in there, especially if you're running Wireshark or something like that on your traffic. But you get to see a lot of the landscape, and then that helps you with some of your initial hunting in there. But you get into government offices there, and you're thinking, well, they've got to have some form of discipline and policy and procedure. No, they don't. They've got UVerse in there because I happen to be the guy who went in there, and we set up that office, and we moved across town, and there was UVerse sitting in here because it might have been somebody else's house or whatever, and we just turned that over. And now I've got a home router in there, and everything is just wide open, and we never change that password. That's why you got to black stuff out, because it's all exposed when you see it. And people are running government offices with 200 people on a 10 meg circuit, and I know they're doing a lot of port management on that. But and you see some things that are not necessarily really SCADA. although this is the county that did have SCADA in their environment, they had these labeled as SCADA, and of course that gets your attention right away. But then you start looking at it even deeper and you say, well, this is really close to life cycle, and this one here is long since life cycled out, and why is it still inside of your environment in here, and you could touch it. And so they didn't believe me, so you had to go out there and go to eBay and go, look, I can buy that for $10, brand spanking new from 2005, that's still in a box somewhere, some collector's got it, and that's only $10. And then the TZ 210s, they're showing that they life cycled out in May of 2017, which, it's almost like, it's milk and it's only a week old. Yeah, I could probably still drink it. Well, same thing with that. Yeah, it's a week old. What happens in our world? A week old, okay, now an exploit comes out. Well, if they're not doing any kind of updates for it, a day old is bad, right? Because it's out there. What happens? You're pregnant. So, same thing. You're not going to remember anything about this talk, but by gosh, I get people in Reno that go 6 months after they see me give a talk, they go, "You're that pregnant guy." And I go, "Yeah, that's me. That's me." All right, we already talked about that. We beat those up enough. And we see them default all the time. And it's not just printers, it's everything. You pick the device. This is in a data center at a government site where they had 8 of these out there, of the Schneider APCs out there, and they said, oh yeah, well they're okay, they're locked down and nobody can get to them from outside. Well, they don't have to, because I'm the insider threat. Remember, I'm that guy who's getting ready to go sideways, and I can see this in the data center. I said, if I shut this down, what would happen? I'd lose half my data center. And they had 8 of them, and they were all in the same shape. They're all APC is what default for Schneider UPSs are. But the last time the batteries were serviced was 2014. That's just pure negligence, in my opinion. I mean, obviously, you should be staying up with that. You don't have many batteries in there. It's not like it's a huge financial cost. But sometimes it's not just the stuff that you're scratching the surface. You got to dig a little bit, right? You got to dig a little deeper in the environment, kind of like a little chihuahua here. But I know you guys saw that, but you didn't want to. I wanted to make you moan. But so sometimes you look a little bit deeper in the environment in there, and this was one when we were looking at somebody's gear right about the same time that everything came out about the new information about struts. We're going, well, hey, let's go take a look at it, and sure enough, they were pregnant as well. And they said, well, it really doesn't affect us. We've had this on there a long time. The problem was all their machines and all their Apache servers were all way out of date, well beyond. We were going to get there at some point in our crawling, but we hadn't made it there yet. It just forced us to kind of put it up more in the front. They had everything that was out of date. And my illustration here is really just, we put a snapshot of the exploit or the code that you can use. Never put the code in the report and just raw text and copy and paste and put it in there, snapshot it, because you don't want somebody to take and just, is this really legit? And they start and copy and paste, and all of a sudden they just kill themselves. So you don't want to drop real code and live code in there. It's almost like, what is it, the old Hackers Quarterly, where they always change something in there so that way you don't kill yourself when you run it. Time to time, we'll drop agents on there. We have a partnership with Lumen, and it runs some monitoring capabilities, but nice thing that it does is we can drop this agent. It's a 93K agent on each one of the specific machines, especially problem children machines. Or if I drop it on the DNS server, something like that, or an AD server, I can extrapolate the Active Directory info on there, and it pulls everything into one nice snapshot for you, and it's really sharp shot, and it gives you heads up on which machines are a little bit wonky and which ones are anomalous. And over time, it starts giving you baseline information about a specific machine, but also user activity, and that creates more of an insider threat profile. I'm a 9-to-5 guy. I'm always there. I'm Monday through Friday. And all of a sudden, you start seeing me working late at night. I'm not working on any projects. They check with my supervisor, and they go, no, it's not him. But, he's been bitching a whole lot at work lately. And, he's kind of irritated with the way things are going on, and probably getting ready to jump out. I'm moving a lot of traffic around. But also, I might have just accidentally surfed to something, and it's creating some noise in the background, and that machine might be infected with something. And we see that all the time. And it's stuff that doesn't necessarily trigger one of your alarms, but it's just stuff that's in the background. Warranties and licenses is something that's overlooked all the time. And once they register a machine and they put it in production, they don't ever look at that again. And we see it all the time. We'll grab their serial numbers or their TAC numbers in there and run those through the system there as part of what we do as well, because if they've got any kind of compliance regulatory requirements and they're out of spec, then they either need to renew it or it's time to do some upgrading. And if you've ever experienced running a data center or running servers and you let it expire, then try to reestablish a warranty on there. It's really costly. It's much easier for you to catch it. It's expiring tomorrow. Let's go ahead and bump it up and renew it today. But if you do it day after tomorrow, it's almost like buying a whole new server. You might as well go ahead and buy something new. But when somebody's running a 2900 sitting in a hospital environment on a production environment, they got issues. Sir, do you have a question? Oh, okay. And then the very last thing, we always look at the space, power, and cooling. I'm an old data center guy and ran data center management for a couple of companies in the past. So that's just one of those things that I like to geek out on. I look in there and say, hey, you guys are running things kind of fly by the seat of your pants, almost like startup companies. And some of these places, this is a school district where it looks like it's in grandma's basement down there, and they're right next to a hot water heater. And I'm thinking, well, things are going to go sideways one day when all of your pretty, professionally cabled gear is going to get wet over there. But those are things to think about. And then in some instances, you've got to have those compliance issues. It really delineates, and you start looking at, hey, how much walk around room do you need between your racks and the wall and all that? Depends on where you're at. In industry, if you're in private industry, hey, who cares? You just stick it on a wall somewhere and stick it under a cubby and let it heat up and go for it. But if you're in hospital, government space, law enforcement, where you've got some information that's going to have to be used in trial or something like that, or you've got to serve as expert witness, all that stuff has to be captured and defined, or else every case that you're involved with is thrown out. Complacency is the biggest issue for a lot of these folks. They're just overwhelmed. I mentioned it before, where they have a good idea on Monday and they never get to it on by Friday because they're putting out fires all week long. Hey, my printer, I can't print to it. How do I do this? I'm on wireless. I'm on terrestrial again, and I just came off a trip. I can't do this, that, the other. But they just start putting the cart before the horse. This is one where they've got a nice office door back in here, and they've got a server back in here, and they got a monitor and keyboard that's unlocked. But I could peek through the little slats on the venting of the door there, and I could see their stickies with passwords written on there. And so it really just comes back to the discipline of everybody. And I always kid around about that, but how many of us see it every day still? I mean, has anybody seen it in the last month? Of course, yeah, because I got it on my bottom of my Mac right here. I remember that. But no, I mean, I at the hospital I was in, I'd pick up about every other keyboard, and I would see all the doctors' number for all of their coding written on there, because it was just difficult, because we had about 12 different doctors that each department was dealing with, and it was just difficult to remember all that stuff. They couldn't have put that in some sort of form into their billing statements or into their scripting or something like that. It was right next to the sticker that had their passwords on it. Sometimes you find really cool stuff out there in some of these rural places. This is out in Pioche, population nothing, in Lincoln County, Nevada, and it's an old jailhouse. And the server room was in an old jail cell. And so I was like, I got to take some pictures of this. And we usually try not to throw people out there, but Uncle Fester is their IT manager out there. And so he was showing me all that stuff. And I was like, this is great. I said, I'll put this up on a slide deck somewhere, and somebody's going to try to reverse this key now. Now they've got the number on it. They'll go ahead and try to cut that key. Now you got to go find it and get by to get to the door. Well, actually 3. You got to get into that building. He actually was. He was telling me, he's bragging on his security. Yeah, I used to work at DOE. I used to run classified systems. So you ain't getting in anything here. Good luck, Jack. They had 89 end devices on them. We got into 80 of them, because everything that he had was default, everything. And the reason for it is because their 2.5, 3 hours from civilization. And so whenever a vendor would come out, he's usually bouncing back and forth around something because he had some remote sites. I'm not there on site, and my Xerox guy showed up. He needs to get into the printer. Seal of an envelope or something like that for him to get into it and have to reset that because that's hard. And so he said, I just leave everything on default. And then, all my vendors, I vet them, I trust them. I said, good luck with that. I don't even trust my employees. So what are you talking about? All kidding aside, I mean, that's just not the way to run discipline structure for a government organization. Because if there's a compromise, what happens? They start diving in deep, and that little chihuahua comes in there and starts looking in deeper and find out that you're not exercising discipline and due diligence and caution. Now people start getting fired. It's always once things go sideways. It's all great and easy until things go sideways. So that's really my talk. My hope was just to inspire you to think a little bit differently and see some value in not necessarily breaking someone's gear to be able to get the keys to the kingdom, because you can do it in a lot of different ways, and it saves them a lot of time and money. And in a lot of cases, most of our clients out there, when you have that first conversation, when they say, hey, I want a pen test, you go, I say, no, you don't. Number one, you really can't afford it, and you don't really want everything that comes along with it because you're not staged for it. Unless it's somebody that we've already built that environment. And we say, bring it on, write a check. So we've got time, and I'll be glad to answer any of your questions if you got any. Yes, sir. Some of the initial conversations when I reach out to the point of contact from my client, who's the insurance carrier, and they say, hey, here's the county manager or something like that, and they point me down to their IT guy. The IT guy is going, whoa, 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 what's going on? Why are you here? So you have a lengthy conversation initially of, look, I'm here as advice and assistance, and I just want to be a resource for you guys. We live and breathe in the security. You're already paying for this. This is something that you guys pay for under your insurance for cybersecurity. So we're just providing you what you're already paying for. And we give the report to you, and we give them that assurance that we're not taking this and give that report to the state. We do give a copy to the insurance carrier and to the site manager. That's the only two people who get that report, and it's for them to do with what they will. We're not going to raise any alarms or anything like that. Unless we find something that is illegal, we find kiddie porn and things like that, then it's a whole different story. Oh, I'm sorry. The question was, what is the conversation that we have, and some of the difficult conversations that we might have with the client in the onset of the engagement? Others? Yes, sir. Not in these instances here with this set of clients. Now, we do pen testing, and we do active pen testing. We do a lot of incident response too, and data breach investigations for forensics value. I'm a forensicator by trade, but for this model and these instances here with these clients, that's what I'm talking about here. Is we don't do that. There will be onesies and twosies when they say, they almost kind of throw that challenge flag up there, and they say, that's a pretty hard box. You can't get into that, and we'll pull it aside and say, all right, well, we'll kind of do that on the side, but that's not part of the formal assessment, because any of the pen testers would probably attest to it that it's pretty simple to break something, and we don't want to shut their work down either, because they're usually one deep in any aspect of the system. Sir.
So, what's your success ratio for if you go back to your client? You find them with the same vulnerability, or do they? What's their success rate on patching the findings that you've already done?
So I've been doing this for 1.5 years with them, and I've not gotten through all the clients because they've got 173 clients. So we've not gone back to anybody twice yet in this set of clients, but we've gone back when somebody has felt that they've remediated everything, and they say, hey, at least give me an outside look. And we always find that there's something that has been patched and has been remediated, but there's something else we always find something else. And it's probably not necessarily that something else opened up. It's just that it's what the scanner caught that day. Because as you know, you can scan the same environment 3 times back to back, and you're not going to get exact same findings in there, because it just depends on what response is triggering another event. Absolutely, and that's part of that initial conversation. Is the question was, do we run into those network admins who are pretty convinced that we're trying to get them fired, or we're coming in under less than the reasons why we say we're coming in? And that absolutely so. They put up their caution flags right off the bat, just like any of us would. Somebody's coming in to inspect me, what's going on? But a lot of cases they don't realize, because cybersecurity and risks liability insurance is relatively new to some of them, and they didn't realize that they've subscribed to it as an end user, and so it's the first time that they've had anybody come out. Now, we've built rapport and relationships with them over time, and by the time we make it on site, we've got pretty good rapport with them. And then by the time we leave, I always feel like we've got really good rapport with them, because we'll show them things, and I pretty much leave them a set of what my tools are that I was using, and then he can, or she can use the same type of tools, and it doesn't cost them anything. If you can give them something that's no cost or low cost to them, that's within budget, it's a resource for them. And a lot of them want to learn. It's just not something that they've had time to focus on. It's all about how you build rapport with them. You can't just walk in and go, yeah, I can do this. You can't. Stand back. Any other questions? Sir. So we use and I apologize, I don't have it here. I'll add that to my PDF that I spit my slide deck out, and I'll add that to the back of it. But we use critical, high, medium, low, and then informational, and then what that really represents on those types of findings. And quite a few of them are informational. But the nice thing about it for a lot of these is they've never seen what's baseline for them. So the first shot out of the gate for each one of those clients is really what their baseline is, and then everything is. And after I did the first 9 or 10 counties, we used them as a baseline to say, you know what, you're better than most, or you're lacking behind some of your contemporaries. And so we put that statement in there in the administrative paragraphs in there, just saying, based on this number, we've already got a good sampling of what's out here. And then we encourage them to talk to their peers, and that's one of the things that they're lacking. They're in a county, but they've got 2 different city managers under that. They're not talking to each other to share ideas, because there's usually some guy who's really sharp or gal who's really sharp, and they can educate the others and kind of be a mentor. They need that out there when you're remote, instead of paying for professional services. Okay. Yes, sir. I do, and to repeat the question is, do I see in industry, do we need help with writing and explaining our work and being able to speak to various levels in there? And I do. We always include an executive summary and also administrative notes at the end. Here's some things that I get out of the IT staff and the core staff, things that they've been trying to get the leadership to buy into or invest in. I social engineer them, so to speak, to make sure that I get that info, because I'm helping them, because they're getting it from a third party as opposed to the inside staff, who's, in a lot of cases, they're perceived as whining about things that they need. But if they hear it from somebody else, I say, look, you guys need more space, power, and cooling in here because the way you've got your data center, it's kind of a liability. But the reporting is, the technical write-up is extremely important because, number one, I'm really concerned about getting someone fired. They're blatantly negligent, and you just see that they don't care, and they don't show any interest while you're there. But that's a different story in and of itself. But it's when you see that they care, and they're struggling themselves, and they need some help, and so you really want to wrap it around, that becomes a leadership issue. I don't care how skilled or unskilled that technical staff is. If the leadership is not helping mentor them, get them training that they need so desperately, that becomes a leadership issue, and I have no problem pointing the finger at the leadership and in their failures too. So, but reporting is extremely difficult and challenging to make sure that you don't use the wrong vernacular to get someone fired. I think we're close. Yep, we're out of time. So I'll be out here for a couple more hours before I have to bail and go back east, but be glad to have, pull aside with you guys all you like. I'm based out of Knoxville, Tennessee and Reno. I spend half my time. I'm 2 weeks in each side. Got business on both sides. Thank you guys for coming out.